Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to the 6th webinar on Foundation and Government Grants. We want to thank Lindsay Suggs, Director of Research Development here at Partners of the Americas, for her participation in today's webinar. She will be leading a webinar going over particularly foundation grants, how to approach foundations, and what to keep in mind when you're thinking about approaching a foundation regarding a potential grant, support of one of your projects or programs, and what to keep in mind when you do so, as well as a brief overview of the government grant cycles and those mechanisms, and ending with, well, how does Partners International, or how do the offices in Washington figure into your own strategies for approaching government grants or foundations for grants, or considering applying for government grants. And we'll just give you some more information about that, as well as some examples of some opportunities in which we can work together to support you directly in your fundraising efforts and grant writing efforts. So, with no further ado, I'd like to just follow on with today's agenda, as you'll see on your screen. I wanted to just let you know that we will be sending out a survey regarding the Sustainable Network Training Program. Get your feedback. So please be aware of that. That should be going out within the next week. We'd love to get your input, your feedback on what's worked, what hasn't worked, what you have learned regarding the webinars. What topics did you find most revealing or most relevant to your work? And we really want to make sure that we can offer these types of training programs in the future to other chapter members and expand this to chapters in Central and South America and the Caribbean, and your input will be very helpful to make that a successful program. Also, I'd like to just remind everyone that a big part of this program is the fundraising aspect. A number of you have already sent out some emails, have engaged your networks, and have been able to raise money. We've already raised over $1,000, or you have already raised over $1,000, and this has been primarily through this type of engagement, sending out emails, getting support from your networks. And I want to just ask Andrew and Nicole to just shed a little bit more light on your progress, and I know that they want to highlight a few of our participants. So, Andrew, how are you?
I'm good, Michael. And yeah, thank you everyone for being online and joining us today. And first off, Michael, can you guys hear me well? Is the audio good?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
All right, perfect. So again, I just wanted to say, yeah, thank you guys for joining us for this webinar. Looking forward to what Lindsay has to say about grant writing, and I know a big part of what a lot of you are looking at in terms of sustaining your chapter and kind of moving forward and really engaging your community is that getting that kind of grant support and really kind of making that as effective as possible. Just to update with how things are looking since we last touched base together about a couple weeks ago, some really exciting news. We have reached and hit our first $1,000 in terms of total fundraising. The exact number is about 1,039. Although we are expecting some checks and kind of cash donations coming to the Citizen Effect office, courtesy of some of your own supporters out there. So thank you very much for really kind of taking advantage and using the resources and information we provided and putting it to work. You guys have been doing a really great job, and I'm really happy and look forward to taking the next steps in terms of helping and identifying further outreach and kind of making those fundraising events that some of you guys are planning, again, as effective as possible. To kind of give a short highlight and give a little shout out to One such example, this past week, we had Team Illinois with Christine and Pat out there. They did a successful barbecue. There was a kind of an office barbecue out in Illinois, and they helped sell drinks, and they had a good time. It was this past Sunday, and from this event, they were able to collect $210. So I mean, yeah, something like this, really small scale types of events are really great in terms of actively engaging your community, getting their support, and they raised a good amount of money. And actually, this is kind of the exciting part is this is kind of part one of their fundraising strategy. They also have a bigger fundraising event later in November. They'll be teaming up and working on a little film screening out in Illinois. And so basically this past barbecue on Sunday was about just kind of letting people know and getting the early buzz going for that event. And so again, it's kind of like riding the wave of the fundraising momentum to kind of get things going, get things started. And so we're happy to see how they're progressing, and we're happy to see next steps with everybody else too. I'm really excited and look forward to where we can go from here. And let's see, I think, yeah, is Nicole on the line right now? I think she has a really great update to share with us too.
Nicole just got in touch with me. She's having a little trouble getting online. She'll be calling in just a second.
Okay.
Would you like to fill in for her?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so kind of really exciting news for what we're talking about in terms of next steps. Again, what we're really excited about here at Citizen Effect is further kind of nurturing and kind of growing the connections we have with your individual chapters out there. As whether it's Oregon, whether it's Wyoming, Minnesota, Washington, New York, we really look forward to helping your own programs out there, not just the Sustainable Network program, but really hoping to see if there are ways that Citizen Effect can assist you guys and help programs out there. And to do that, I'm really excited and really happy to share with you, we are looking into the possibility of having you guys be able to use our platform, the fundraising platform, the project page, to help support specific programs in your chapter. For example, one of the things that we're looking forward to is, possible ways to help support youth ambassador programs in your chapters. I mean, this is a really great program, and I'm really happy to learn more about it. And it seems like, there's a lot of great work putting into that program in particular. And so, if you guys are interested, we are kind of looking to take next steps to see if chapters out there, if your own chapters would be interested in using the Citizen Effect platform to fundraise and support particular programs like youth ambassadors or other youth summits, or just like maybe other projects that you guys are involved in. So that's kind of where we're looking at right now, and so we'll definitely keep you posted. And so definitely am excited and look forward to seeing how we can again really help your chapters going forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. And we'll be sharing some more information on the different approaches that some of our chapters are taking. Don Ruff, for example, from Oregon, has set up his own separate page, project page on Citizen Effect to support the Oregon-Costa Rica Youth Exchange Program. We want to support Gerard Lagos and Eric Brand over in Minnesota to do the same thing. So, please think of Citizen Effect and these partnerships that partners is able to forge with other organizations as an opportunity for your chapters to reach out to new networks, to ramp up or scale up your current work, and to have much deeper impact with your programs and projects. So thank you, Andrew, and I'm sure Nicole will be with us shortly. But moving on, we want to go into the meat and potatoes of today's presentation, which is going to be focused on foundations and government grants. And I will be handing over the screen here to Lindsay. And Lindsay, how are you?
Good. Thank you, Michael. I hope everybody is doing well. And I first want to congratulate everybody. It was great to hear Andrew's update and the success that you guys have made thus far. I think it's very exciting to hear that. And I was, in preparation for this, just checking online to see what types of programs that you guys are fundraising for. And just this is an exercise that we as staff went through a few months ago, so it's great what you've done, and congratulations thus far. So if I can just go into it, Mike, I first want to put out a disclaimer here, and that's I started off with partners about a year ago, and I came on board because I've got about 6-7 years experience working with government grants. And want just a disclaimer here that I'm on a learning curve of learning about how to work with foundations. And so a lot of what my presentation is going to be about is what I've learned in this past year and how that's really shaped how Partners in Americas are moving forward in the next year. I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to ask questions, and Mike can physically see me, and I'm going to keep my eye open in case I don't see a question coming up. So if you do, then Mike's going to make sure he'll throw something at me. I don't know. I prepped on this just really trying to understand that I know you guys probably have either some experience or a lot of experience working with foundations or government grants, and so if this is too much or not enough, I'm happy to go into more detail, or if you think I've speeded through something, just let me know, and I'll chat about that. And I'm also looking forward to learning some experiences that you guys have had regarding foundations and governments, the grant process. I've got a lot of experience in them, but I don't think I'm an absolute top expert, and I'm willing to learn and think it'd be great to learn from experience that you guys have had. And want to thank Lynn. She's already asked a question regarding priorities and agencies awarding grants, so I will definitely touch on that. So without further ado, this what you're seeing here is something that we thought was the missing piece to partners and how we deal with programs and how we deal with funding. The foundations part of it was really that missing piece because we happen to be kind of government grant heavy, and so we've done a lot of this research as the missing piece. And so the objectives here really is just to talk about some of the funding trends, what we've seen, how we have started to engage foundations and how Partners has engaged them in the past, a good overview of government grants, and again I'm happy to go into more detail, tools that we use in both engaging foundations and governments, and then ways that you guys as chapters and programs can engage us, the staff here, more in Washington, and how we can be engaging you guys more as chapters. One of the things that we found is in foundations, in just funding trends across the board, is that foundations over the past 10 years have been increasingly their funds towards global and specifically in Latin America programs. So that's why we're paying attention to them, because we need to diversify funds, but they're also increasing the funds across the board and global and Latin America funds. They've played their role is in both democracy and governance, civil society participation, education is definitely something that we've seen increase over the last 10 years as well. One thing that we've learned in thinking about priority areas and how we approach foundation is it's important to know what their thematic and geographic priority areas are, especially related to if we're thinking about regional programs or a country-by-country program. And one thing that we've learned is that, especially for chapters, is foundations tend to like a country approach. They like that approach versus a regional approach. We found it a lot easier to approach foundations if you're focusing on, which I think is exactly how our chapters are, so Oregon and Costa Rica, Wisconsin, Nicaragua, you've got these country-to-country lines up, so that's easier for us. What you're seeing here is, it's disclaimer here that this is a bit dated, but it's the way we think of when we look at information, when we're trying to gather information about foundations. These columns represent specifically LAC is what we call them, that's Latin America and Caribbean, the funding trends for Latin America and the Caribbean over the past few years. And you'll see that the international corporations take up a lot, almost half of the percentage of funds going to Latin America. But you'll see the last two columns are private donors and corporations make up 25% of funds going towards Latin America. Now these are funds that are being implemented, programs implemented in Latin America and the Caribbean. So while we might be addressing some of the private foundations and companies that can be their headquarters here, like a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, their funds are going across the line and they're going to Latin America and the Caribbean. Two things that I want to point out here. Again, in the last two columns, you'll see the foundations and companies. That's, and as I mentioned, 25% of that going to Latin America. But you see the priority issues in the foundations and companies. Again, democracy and governance, civil society, education, arts, culture and leisure, and environment are some of the top priority issues over the past few years. And as of 2007, and I'll go into more updated priority areas, but these are things that we want to know, because that means that we either have concepts, we've got programs that we think that are aligned with these various priorities that we can then pitch to these private donors or corporations. Again here, one of the things that we're seeing, now these are just the foundations, and this is broken down by the 25%, so this is the foundations and the private corporations broken down by priority issue. So again, you'll see the majority of this, which was pretty shocking for us, as democracy and governance and civil society was the amount of funds, the highest percentage of funds going towards Latin America was in the democracy and governance and civil society. Again, you'll see that the sub-issues were human rights, social entrepreneurship, and citizen participation. Where we thought much more of the health or the education and culture type grants would be higher, we learned that that wasn't necessarily the case. So it's helpful for us as we start to prioritize our own approaches and concept papers, is lining them up with the various priority issues from various across the line for Latin America. We've got various concept papers laying around, and we always want to make sure that we're tying it back to their particular priority. And at the same time, one of the challenges that we face is that we don't want to always chase the money. We want to chase the innovation. And we want to be relevant. And so while we know that there's more funds going towards democracy and governance, and we definitely have that capacity, there's some great innovative ideas around environment and education. So that's just helpful for us as we think through priorities for us here. One thing I want to share with you guys, and this is the top 10 leading foundations, donor organizations that give to Latin America. Now this is a mixture of organizations and foundations that are based in the United States and also based in Latin America. You'll see that the top leading donor organization is actually a Brazilian firm, and it is, you'll see again over the past few years, has increased the number of funds from over the past few years. I see Lynn's got a question. If you want to go ahead and ask Lynn?
Yes, Lindsay, thank you. How do you determine between competing kinds of needs, and to what extent do you rely on the Latin American voices themselves to help you to make those determinations? So if you have democracy and governance versus leisure, arts, education, how do you make those decisions, and to what extent do the Latin American voices play into that?
Great question. I think, first of all, the competing needs, and that's based on the chasing the funds versus the innovations, because I think we know that our chat, for example, we're working in Brazil. We know that there's a social enterprise opportunity for us, but that there's a real health need for them. We definitely try to go with the various needs on the ground within an existing program or an existing chapter project, for example, versus the funding. I think for us, we rely on the Latin America voices to help us prioritize those competing needs. We have what we call our point person in each country that can either be a program person, part of our chapter, or somebody that we've cultivated that can help us with those competing needs. A great example of this is in Colombia. We have somebody that is our point of contact that we like to either bounce ideas off of, that has the ear of the embassy, of the USAID mission down there, or other foundations that can help us make those sorts of decisions. I hope that answered your question. And I will actually go into more detail of that a little bit later.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay.
So again, I think what we've learned is that in Brazil, they have a healthy social corporate responsibility. And this is definitely, you can see that now with the top two foundations, are Brazilian foundations that are giving to Latin America, obviously in Brazil. One of the top U.S. foundations that give to Latin America are Ford Foundation, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and then while the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a top foundation overall, but for Latin America they come in number 7. So again, this goes back to why it's this growing need and this growing trend of where they're funding in Latin America, which is why we're paying more attention to these organizations. So when you engage, and how do you engage? Now that we know that they're out there, who they are, how do we start to just engage them? What we've learned, again, and this goes back to our point person, is intelligence is absolutely the most important thing in engaging any type of grant, foundation, or government out there. As I think that we've learned from Citizen Effect that people like to give money to people they know. And I think that's very true as far as foundations and government. They want to give money to organizations that they know have a good rapport and could get good results. And so what we try to do is make sure, again, these top foundations, that we have either the right person inside the organization to give us an audience so we know we can sell them who we are and that we are a credible organization. We have somebody on the ground, if it's a foundation in Latin America, that can, again, that point person that can help us make those contacts. And understand what their priorities are. When are their board meetings? Because when their board meetings happen, they make funding decisions. And so we tried to time our meetings with them either right before a board meeting. Understanding, again, those priorities. Where are they starting to put the thematic themes and the areas where they seem to be funding the most? What is their grant cycle? When do they accept unsolicited proposals or not? When do they have events? And what sort of outreach strategies do we have that we can start reaching out to these various foundations? And what we have here is what we call our dance card. We want to know who we want to dance with and who we don't want to dance with, and at the right time of the dance party, if I can continue with that. And I have a document that I would like to share with you guys to show you what we've done. So I hope everybody can see this is just that kind of intelligence gathering that we've done for the Tinker Foundation. So you'll see that based on our research, we know that in Latin America, they, up until recently, funded policy research development in Latin America and emergency aid. But based on, again, somebody that we're trying to cultivate, not only amongst our staff, but somebody at the foundation, that they've recently changed their giving strategy so that they're focused on critical important areas in Latin America, again, democracy and governance, growth and security, sustainable resource management, and education. Knowing that is going to be very helpful for us as we start to craft various concept papers or grants for them. Towards the bottom here, we now know, once we do decide to submit something, exactly what they're expecting in a grant application. One thing that I've learned is that there's not a lot of creativity in here. It is, when you're turning in a term paper, you know exactly what you need to turn into because you know what the professor likes. And this is exactly the same situation. Each government agency and each foundation likes to receive information in a very specific way, and we like to know exactly what that is. That's part of the intelligence gathering. So in the grant applications, we know exactly what needs to be part of that. What we've also learned from various meetings with our funders in the past and donors in the past is they say half of the time that people spend in submitting an application, they forget something. So that for us means we always have somebody, and when we submit something that hasn't been part of our proposal development, that checks our work, because we want to make sure that we haven't forgotten anything. Again, we know exactly what the initial approach needs to be, in either an application on the website or telephone and writing. Sometimes they tell you don't phone us or don't send us an email, follow the instructions online. Again, we've found out when their board meetings are. We know when the deadlines for when they receive certain grants, and again, the final notification. Part of what we also like to know is what have they funded in the past. This helps us with, again, that priority and not only the thematic areas, but which countries have they prioritized. So for the Tinker Foundation, and I have 3 pages of this, so I'll only show you one. But you'll see that the top one, we know that the Center for Global Development was a recipient. They focused in Brazil and Mexico, and it was a grant for $150,000 that focused on financial services for the poor. And again, and I can send you guys this type of information, but you'll see that, again, 3 pages of the types of grants. Columbia University in the Dominican Republic for $174,000, working on sustainable water source management. We like to know exactly what they're doing. And then what we also do, because it is of selling ourselves as a reputable organization, that they already know us. So over the past 30 years, we know that we have submitted 7 proposals, what they've looked like, and whether or not they've accepted or rejected over a period of time. And we keep track of this. I'm going to go back, and if anybody has any question for this, that's fine. I'm going to go back to here. So again, when we're thinking about engaging foundations, understanding what our priorities are within Partners of the Americas, what corporate capabilities we have, and again, this is just a sampling. We know that the top area is economic development, food and agriculture development is one of them. And there are a lot of, based on our research, we found that there are a handful of foundations that give towards this thematic area. So then each of those foundations, we have one of those Word documents like the Tinker Foundation that I just showed you. We've filtered out all of this information so we know how to better approach them. Again, the social and economic development, children and youth, there's a number of foundations here. And then also the education and vocational training, employment training, there's 3 foundations there that we know that fund this for Latin America. Breaking down, just showing you guys the type of information that we like to know. Again, for the Ford Foundation in 2010, we know that they gave, in Latin America, 66 grants to Mexico and Central America, 32 to the Andean and Southern Cone countries, and 39 grants in Brazil. The total of funds, for example, for Brazil was $7.9 million, and they ranged, each individual grant ranged from $62,000 to $450,000. So what that means for us here at Partners Washington is that we know we're not going to ask Ford Foundation for $1 million grant. We need to either use that as part of an existing proposal or existing program, or this might be, I think, more along the lines of types of grants that the chapters could qualify for, especially where you've got anywhere from a 10,000 to 50,000 grant that you as a chapter may or may not be able to implement. Of those numbers of grants, again, we always understanding what the priority areas are. We know in Central, and again, this is just for Mexico and Central America, and we have pie charts also for the Indian region and for Brazil. So we know the thematic areas, and percent somehow came off of this. So we know what percentage of funds of those 66 grants for Mexico and Central America, which ones went, how many went to transparency, how many went to community rights, how many went to HIV/AIDS discrimination and such. For government grants, and I'm happy to go into more about the foundations, but for government grants, as a general overview, we currently receive grants from the Department of State, from USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, there's the Department of Labor, and then there's many more. And I think it's the who within these organizations, I think, is also equally as important to know. There's within Department of State, there's the Sports United office that we receive grants from. We also receive grants from the WHA office, and that's the Western Hemisphere Affairs office. There's the others that are not, the State Department is organized by region, but also by thematic area. And so we know there's a group of people that only work on thematic areas, for example, climate change. Since we're implementing a climate change grant from them, we were recently approached by them to implement another one, and so those are using different types of funds. And that's, I think it's important to understand how governments work and how their funding structures work. And so we know that it's not all one big lump sum coming from the State Department. It's each thematic area or geographic area has a certain number of funds that they can use. And so we know those types of funds. And I think it's also important to know the timing. Right now is especially very interesting, as I'm sure all of you guys know. The fiscal year is ending, and they might have various pots of money left over. And so now's the time to approach these different, the Sports United office or WHA or the Climate Change office, to ask what sort of leftovers they've got, because we've got concepts that we believe that they can utilize those funds for. And they're happy to get rid of it most of the time because they need to spend it before the fiscal year is done. With USAID, it's the same thing. There's the Latin America office, there's the Economic Growth office, Democracy and Governance office, and they all work very differently with their funding structures. And so we not only follow the fiscal year, but we also follow the political priorities. Right now, as you can imagine, the funding trends, and this is getting to the funding trends parts, Latin America is not top priority for foreign funds. It is the Middle East, it's Afghanistan and Pakistan, and that's where we're seeing a lot of funds going towards their government funds, and it's at the expense of other thematic areas like education and geographic areas like Latin America. The last time that we looked at top priorities for USAID, Latin America in general was number 8, I believe, which is very, very, very low from what it has been in the past. So we try to take a proactive view at this versus reactive. We have right now what we go through various forecasts that governments send out. We try to make sure that we've got the right person inside the organization and outside of the organization that can give us the intelligence that we need to make really good decisions, and knowing what those priorities are, not only for us inside the organization here, but also like whether or not we have the resources on the ground to go after a particular opportunity. We also have an evaluation criteria. We have 12 criteria that every time a government comes out with a grant, we go through with a group to make a go or no-go decision, is what we call them, based on, do we have the right intelligence, do we have the right internal capacity, or can we get the capacity to go after a particular opportunity, do we have the staff time, does the chapter, if we're involving the chapter, does the chapter have the capacity, Does this strengthen our connections with our chapters? And do we even have the likelihood of winning? And much, much more. So the tools and resources that we use, and I didn't go into a lot of the grant writing parts of things because I know that in your packets it goes through those specific steps. And again, I can talk about that if you'd like. But the tools that we use that I think would be very useful for you guys especially is for foundations, there's the Foundation Center. And those two email or the websites, I highly recommend that you guys subscribe to these listservs. I get emails from these, from the Foundation Center every single day, and I also get emails from the Philanthropy Digest, and I just want to actually show you an example of one. Here you'll see, this is from the Foundation Center. It's a PubHub alert. Now, the first one that came up is talking about China overtaking U.S. as a global superpower. Not very interesting for us. However, the next two is a national study of nonprofit executive leadership. It's important for us because I think it would be important for you guys as chapters as well. You think through, it touches on the subjects of philanthropy, volunteerism, capacity building, and it also gives us another foundation because it's being funded by the Eugene and Agnes Meyer Foundation. Somebody we haven't looked at in the past, and so we think, is this somebody that we should consider? And again, it also gives us the update that although we've been following the Gates Foundation, here's the first report or the first view of their 2010 annual report. So again, this is something that I get almost on a daily basis, and it's about 50% helpful, maybe 50% not, because it is global. Going back here. The Avena donor index, I just want to quickly go through this. This is another thing that I think would be very helpful. For example, I'm searching for, I'm going to use Brazil, just because Lynn asked her a question. I know her chapter is ministerialized. So I'm going to click over here in the advanced search. It's going to pop up that I want to look into Brazil, if it lets me. So I can click onto Brazil, and just without putting any other indicators in there, through this Latin America Donor Index, in Brazil, it gives me the list to the right-hand side. You'll see a list of tons of organizations, either based here in the United States or in Brazil, that fund towards Brazilian projects. This goes on and on and on and on. And then the best part, I think, for us is that it's totally interactive. You're able to, I just clicked on World Vision, and it will pop up World Vision's page, their web page, types of information that we automatically look for, thematic areas of funding, where they fund outside of Brazil, if that's interesting for us. And this is where it kind of gets hit or miss. You don't always get the most updated information. And so you'll see that how much that they've spent, their total expenditures, and then how much they're paying attention to in Latin America. Again, for governments, we comb opportunities every single day in grants.gov and fedbiz.gov. Now these are things that I could give a separate webinar on how to do this. And so our staff here do that. In fact, we're looking for big ticket items, but we just found one yesterday that was for Belize, and it was a ceiling of $300,000 over 5 different grants, which is something that I think that we sent to the chapter as a heads up to them. Is this something that they would be interested in? Again, listservs that I think are very helpful for us that we follow on a daily basis. The development, DevX is really very helpful. The Development Newswire, and also the Center for Global Development helps us understand various trends in Latin America, also various thematic areas like climate change and where those funds tend to be going. Engaging with partners. Again, one thing that I've known that we've done is here from Washington in the past that we haven't done recently is aggregate a lot of this information and send it out to chapters so that you guys have it. So that a lot of times you guys have full-time jobs. You can't really read all of these emails every single day, the various listservs. And so what we would like to do in the next month or two is start to formulate a way that we can aggregate this information and package it so it's helpful for you guys. Another way that you can engage with us here is We're working on a program right now that's a youth leadership program based on the methodology of the Youth Ambassadors program called Youth Lead. And we want to engage the chapters more because we know you guys are doing these types of programs. In like Oregon, we talked to John Ruff just last week about this, or 2 weeks ago, about how to engage and expand the existing programs that you guys are doing based on the methodologies that you guys and based on the lessons learned that we have also developed. So that's it. I think I've talked more than I should have, and so I'll give it back over to Michael and take any questions.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks again for your great presentation. You covered a number of interesting subjects that I know a lot of our participants had been asking questions about, not just throughout the program, but I've heard a number of our chapter members just ask questions about, well, how do we work better with partners? What do you actually do? I know some of our chapter members think that the international offices are primarily just focused, for example, on education and culture, and they're surprised when they visit us that a lot more is going on. You know, we have our youth exchange team, we have our farmer-to-farmer team, and then an integral part of this organization is our research development unit. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot that that we can offer our chapters. There's a lot of overlap between the work that we do and the work that our chapters do. And we just want to make sure that we work together more efficiently and effectively to ensure that our chapters are that much more effective on the ground and in implementing their own programs and projects. Just before we go into the Q&A section, I'd just like to present one example, which is actually, once again, Oregon and Costa Rica. You know, it turns out that the Intel Foundation, which is based in Seattle, in Portland, they work a lot with Costa Rica because one of their assembly plants is out there, and the chapter there had always been interested in reaching out to the Intel Foundation to see how they could work and develop some type of project with them or get some funding, and they'd never actually done so. They'd never approached the foundation, so they reached out to us, and we helped set up a meeting, and our president went out to Oregon, and in working with Don, they went to visit the Intel Foundation, and they started a whole repertoire between the chapter and the Intel Foundation to support their youth education programs in Costa Rica. So you never know where the opportunities are, but you also want to see how we can work together to support your efforts in reaching out to foundations whenever possible. And I'd like to open up now to questions from the audience, from our participants. Are there any questions regarding the presentation or any questions that you'd like to make to Lindsay? Yes, Lynn? We can hear you.
Yes, thank you, Michael. This is Lynn from Colorado, partnered with Brazil, Minas Gerais, and Alagoas. On Stephanie's presentation under government grants, the proactive versus reactive I'm very interested in. Could she say more about forecasts, intelligence, and priorities, and how you can target a grant to try to meet those challenges?
Yes. So one thing, when I came on about a year ago, we did an assessment here on how we react to certain government grants, and we realized that we were very good at once the grants came out, but 100% of that time, which I can guarantee you that once a grant actually goes live, and that's when it becomes public, it's too late most of the time to actually bid on it because a lot of people already had the right intelligence in order to go after something. So the United States government, a lot of times, and I can send this out to all of you guys if you'd like, forecasts. So we know where the USAID is going to be prioritizing both in thematic area and region over the next year, and it's updated every 3 months. And actually, I'm no longer I could show you now what it looks like. So again, so that's the actual Oh, I've been made. Okay. I can try to do this and talk at the same time. So what we've done is the government, again, shows up these, oh no, these forecasts, and we typically, we look at them from obviously our point of view, but then most of these are big ticket items and not necessarily some of the like the lower amounts. And so funding opportunities, here it is right here. So this is just for USAID, and then where areas where in other government agencies where we don't necessarily have a formal forecast, we know that we can have the right people inside the organization that can help us with those right conversations and those right priorities. And it should be, this is actually, what you're seeing now is our resource development. We categorize everything, every single intelligence that we get, we categorize this. So this is the forecast, say for example, I'm going to pull up Brazil. We know that in Brazil there are various types of, there's the very first one that you're seeing up there is a possible grant opportunity for economic growth and investing in people, and they give grants anywhere from $1 to up to $500,000. And it'll this opportunity comes out around the Q3 of the fiscal year, and so we look at this for every single country and analyze this. Okay, and we assign people, staff in our office here to go after each country, not just for USAID to analyze these forecasts, but other types of intelligences throughout other government agencies.
Thank you for showing us that chart. It's fascinating.
It can be mind-boggling at times, yes.
We have a question from Patricia Natke. Patricia, she's sends a question. She wants to know, she says, our Illinois chapter has occasionally pursued grants, but have really been mainly successful getting grants through the consulate of Brazil and Chicago. She says that there are many local organizations which give out grants, for example, the Graham Foundation, which provides art and architecture grants up to $30,000. She wants to know how could the Illinois chapter, or the chapters in general, improve on their submissions in the future by getting support and data from international offices. Specifically, who would they reach out to, and if it would be you, Lindsay, or someone from your team?
Sure. I think the first thing that my question is, every time that we submit something and we don't win an opportunity, we always request a debriefing. So either through the consulate or through the Graham Foundation, if we always ask them, say we're always constantly wanting to make sure that we improve the way we submit funding. Let's have an open conversation about, feedback on whether or not you liked a proposal or not, or what we can improve. The second part of that I would say is definitely yes, through our office we'd be happy to either review a proposal before it goes out. A lot of times, or actually every time that we do a proposal, and I've been doing proposals for many, many years, I always have somebody else, this is that second pair of eyes, look at it and read it and make sure it has sense, because it makes sense, because I'm sure, as we're all aware, you get too into a document and you need to be able to, it's hard to step away from that. So we're happy to be that other pair of eyes. Now if we get a request of 30 proposals per month, that might be difficult for us to do, but no, we're here to support the chapters in any way we can.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the presentation? Any questions for Lindsay? Let's see, it looks like right now no other questions. Excellent. Is there anything you'd like to add, Lindsay?
No, I mean, I assume that you guys all have my email, and if not, it's lsuggs@partners.net, and I'm happy to be as a resource. Again, I think I touched base on a lot of different things. If you've got questions about more specific things, I'm happy to share it, and I'm always happy to understand how we can work better with the chapters. we certainly here, as we look for opportunities, again, like I said, one of the decision-making factors for us as we look for opportunities is, does that strengthen our network, and what's the chapter's capacity and how we can involve them in a particular proposal. So we would love to be able to work with chapters in a much more formal way as well as we look forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And I'd like to just add at the end, just that, you know, everyone who's developing a program under the Sustainable Training Network program, or you know of a successful project that's underway at your chapter that you would like to share with us, please do so. You can contact Lindsay and Matt Clausen and myself, because there's always an opportunity to help position that project to receive support, scale it up, to share it with other chapters and see what types of collaboration can occur across chapters. So it's an open invitation for everyone to really take advantage of the resources that you have at your disposal, both here at the offices and also as part of your program. Make sure that you take full advantage of the support that Andrew and Nicole and their team are offering to make sure that your efforts in supporting your project, supporting your chapter, are as successful as they can be. Lindsay, you'd like to add one more thing?
Well, yeah, sorry, just one more thing. Just in the interest of government grants, there's many different acronyms and government speak that we all swim in, at least in our office here, and that's what a proposal looks like. And it's an RFA, which is a request for proposal, that you might see again in this chart that we've got up to the right-hand column. You'll see RFA and RFQ and all of those things, and I can decode that in a later date if you guys are interested. However, what you guys qualify as chapters are things called RFAs, which is a request for application, and it's a cooperative agreement, and those are things that only nonprofit organizations qualify to apply for. Some of the times they only want organizations in country to apply for those, and sometimes they want things that are actually based here in DC or in that country. So just as you're looking for something, if an RFA comes out, that's definitely something that I think you guys would qualify for, and I'm happy to expand on that in an email or a side conversation. But thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Lindsay, and once again, thank you so much for hitting up this presentation. It's we're coming close to wrapping up our series of webinars. I have shared your email address with the participants and those online today. I will also be sending out a link to all the participants for this recording, as well as sharing your presentation. But once again, our doors are open, so feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you, Lindsay, and thanks to everyone who was able to make today's webinar. We'll be having another webinar in 2 weeks, so please keep an eye out for that. That's going to be our last presentation webinar. The webinar that follows that will be kind of a graduation wrap-up, looking at where everyone is in their fundraising efforts, what plans they have, and really just plotting out the remainder of your fundraising efforts. I will also be sending out a survey for you and get your feedback, so please just keep an eye out for that, and if you could please just fill that out and send that back to us, we would really appreciate it. And if there is anything else that you need, just make sure to just give us a holler, send us an email, give me a call, and be sure to schedule your next phone call or check in with Andrew as soon as possible. And Andrew, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I think we're good. One thing I did want to give everybody a little heads up is that we have recently uploaded the webinar recordings on the project pages, on your Sustainable Network project pages on Citizen Effect. And so in addition to finding them on the partners website, you can also share it with your community and your other supporters through the Citizen Effect link that you have too as well.
Thank you, Andrew. So, yeah, everyone check out your pages, your project pages. Make sure that you can mention that to your chapters, your chapter members, your chapter leaders, that they can also access these recordings through your project page. So, let's keep everyone informed. Let's share this information, and let's keep in touch. Once again, thank you so much, and we'll be seeing you in 2 weeks. Have a great day.